Welcome, I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. For 29 years, this TV series has explored a very wide variety of issues related to peace, social justice, economic justice, the environment, and nonviolent social change. We especially provide opportunities for the public to hear voices and viewpoints that are rarely heard in mainstream media. This month, we will learn about a bold and courageous way that people in Uganda and elsewhere are helping people in Uganda whose safety and lives are in danger because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. People in Olympia and elsewhere are providing financial support to help endangered LGBTQ people escape from Uganda through the Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund. We have 3 guests to help us explore this topic. All 3 are active with the local Quaker congregation, the Olympia Friends meeting. We have Kathleen O'Shaughnessy. She is a clinical psychologist with a long interest in serving people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. We have Alan Mountjoy-Venning. He's been very active with Olympia Friends meeting since the 1970s. Gabby Clayton is a key organizer of the Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund. She has long experience working for human rights, including people who are LGBTQ. Good to have all 3 of you here.
Thank you.
Decades ago, in this country, our society just assumed that there were 2 kinds of women, or 2 kinds of people: women who cared about men, men who cared about women, and that was it. And of course, the reality is much more complex than that. We know that people are more varied. It's common for people to be attracted to others of the same sex, lesbians or gay men, and people of both sexes, bisexual. There are also people who are born with one kind of anatomy, but in their hearts they know that their personalities are of the other kind, and these people might identify themselves and live their lives as transgender persons, and a few even have surgery to become transsexual. And some people have taken the old negative term queer and appropriated it in a positive, affirming way, saying this is who I am and not ashamed of it. So out of all these different things, you get this long series of initials, LGBTQ. Is that a fair enough assessment, or is there anything that we need to clarify? Is that a good starting point?
That's a great starting point.
Okay, so we'll be using that that terminology of LGBTQ a few times during the program. Uganda, people should also know that Uganda is a nation in the middle of Africa, a little bit south of the middle and a little bit east of the middle. And in recent years, Uganda has been brutally abusing and even killing LGBTQ people But the roots of the program, or the problem, go back longer. Alan, can you tell us something about the background of this?
Well, when I first learned about this and later, I thought I wondered why the violence against LGBTQ folks was so deep, and did it just erupt or was it historic? And there are a lot of reasons that I think others can share, but there's historical examples going back to an emperor who, like many emperors, his word was law, who had beefs with the British and others and churches that were coming to Africa. And he had concubines, both male and female. Part of his spat with colonial powers and other people trying to influence the area was manifest when he slaughtered a bunch of Christian acolytes. They were boys, and they were in his entourage. And that story was repeated. And over time, the fact that this is a violent megalomaniac went into the background, and the homophobia came into the foreground, preparing a whole society for that kind of bias, which has continued to today. Homophobic, being ready, having that fertile ground for homophobia, when in fact, historically, the homosexual nature of the acolytes that he was involved in was virtually irrelevant, because he did whatever he wanted with all of his subjects.
Now, there are other roots too, with some Christian groups that have a
Contemporary,
bias. Contemporary, they have a bias against gay and lesbian folks and stuff. Could somebody add to this?
We know that some of the evangelical Christian churches in the United States, and probably other countries, but we know the United States ones, have gone over to Uganda and some other African countries carrying anti-gay messages and using that as a way to gain control and power and influence laws and change things even more so.
And as the program proceeds, we'll get into what's been happening as a result.
Right.
Kathleen, I wonder if you could share with us kind of a summary, at least, of what kinds of dangers LGBTQ folks are facing in Uganda.
Well, there have been a number of cases where there's been far more than shunning, but actual beating and physical abuse, as well as people that were losing jobs if they had jobs, being kicked out of schools, and being disowned more or less by their families. And there have been consequences to the families and to straight allies and friends of these people as well. So there have been physical threats to them, threats of their economic threats, and social threats of not being able to be involved in their community fully if they were known to be either gay or lesbian, transgendered, or relatives and supporters of the gays.
And threats to their lives
Threats
as well.
to their lives, and people have been beaten, and some people have been killed.
And we'll get into some more information about this. I want to just do a little overview of the work that you folks are doing through the Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund, just so people get a sense of that, and we'll come back and explore more of that during the hour. What else should we know about this project that you're involved with? Gabby, can you give us a little summary of the Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund?
Sure. A couple of us made contact with people, or had contact with people who were in Uganda. Personally, I made connection online with a gay man who was Ugandan, who had been living as a refugee in Canada. And when the Parliament was going to pass the new anti-gay law,
The
Ugandan Parliament
yeah.
was going to pass what was nicknamed the Kill the Gays Bill, which was the anti-homosexual law, which was signed into law in February of 2014. When he saw that coming, he decided that he needed to return home and help people. He's from a helping profession. He went back to Uganda and helped form a small group who set up 25 safe houses in rural Uganda. And another person we work with is in a leadership community in another part of rural Uganda, and he started having LGBTQ people coming to him because they saw him as someone wise and kind and begging him to help them get out of danger and leave the country because they felt their lives were at risk. And he's a straight man who had had no connection with LGBT people before and contacted somebody that's a Quaker that we work with and said, I don't know anything about homosexuals, what do I do? And he decided to get involved because he just felt the need and felt like he could do something.
So the project is helping people escape from Uganda where they're very much in danger. And I know that when you began the project, you were thinking like an Underground Railroad kind of model, and then you did not stay with that Underground Railroad term, but the model exists.
Right, we actually initially called it the Friends New Underground Railroad and used that name for a short time, but we started hearing from African Americans who felt that it was offensive to them for a variety of reasons, and that it really was pushing them away from a project that they felt connected to and wanted to support. And our meeting met with people and came back and decided that the last thing we wanted to do was alienate supporters who wanted to be working with us, so we changed the name.
If they had felt that the term that was powerful in their tradition of their history was being appropriated by people and used for a different purpose, and I can see the logic of that.
And there were Quakers who were involved in the original Underground Railroad, but there were also Quakers who were not, and were not supportive, and even were slaveholders. So out of respect for people, we decided it was a good thing to change our name.
But the model is very much that, and you have what you call conductors. Can you tell
Right, we
us,
still use some of the terminology.
Tell us about the concept of a conductor and how, a bit about the operations. We'll explore that in more depth a bit later on in the interview, but just so people get a flavor of something of how it works.
Right, and the conductors are people who are in Uganda. I mentioned two of them, but there are more than two in the two groups. And they actually physically help move people out of Uganda with the help of transporters who have to be paid, but they help hide people in safe houses. They sometimes have to move them several times while they're waiting for enough funds to move them across the border to another country where they can start looking at resettling in a future permanent home country. They have to be fed, they have sometimes medical needs, and so it's a way station. And the conductors that we work with are in charge of their part of it and tell us what they need, and then they take people out of Uganda and pass them on to another station where other people and organizations take them and give them more safe homes and help them with passports and visas and help them with transportation to another country.
So the nuts and bolts of the real substantive organizing and decision making is done by people in Uganda.
Absolutely.
And you folks are helpers more at the fundraising end.
The project is truly a Ugandan project. It's Ugandans helping Ugandans, and Quaker Meetings serves as a funding agency, basically, or a funding program, and how the funds get used and by whom and when is truly up to the conductors, how they do that and when, and it's that transportation to safe houses and to the border that was part of the reason that we had the original name for it, which was the Underground Railroad, because there were stops along
Yeah.
the way and people were helping.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that the conductors also do not necessarily know one another, and so there's secrecy in a sense in that way, and privacy for their own protection.
Right.
And that they also that the people who are selected to be transported are people that are essentially vetted at that end, so that it's checked out that in fact they have a very legitimate reason for wanting to leave.
Yeah, and it's there's the privacy and the secrecy, the protection is at every point along the way.
It has to be.
And yeah, and so it's an honest, that's all legitimate, and there's honesty in the process where it's not like you're a bunch of do-gooders that are putting money into some scam, because you have relationships with the people that you're working with.
And,
so
and
it's
we've
all on
had
the up and
connection
up.
with some of the people that have gotten out.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how people can find out about those. You've accomplished a lot already, and you have some new numbers as of today,
As of
December
today.
10 of 2015.
Yes.
Fresh numbers about what your accomplishments have been as of today.
Today, what changed was we had, one of the conductors had 54 passengers that he had had in hiding for quite a long time. And we were able to, he was able to arrange with the transporter to move them out and pay some of the money, and then we'll have to help raise the money to finish paying the debt. But that is 54 people, and 29 transgender people, 15 gay men, 6 lesbian women, and 4 bisexual people. And they range in age from 21 to 40, and 3 of them are disabled, which adds a whole extra element depending on the disability, because moving people physically from one country to another when they're disabled is more complex.
Yeah. And you told me on the phone when we were preparing for this that as of a few days ago, as of early December 2015, the number you gave me was, at that point, was 1,194 people
Total?
Right,
Total.
and now that
Now it's 54
those 54
more.
people are either already out of Uganda or are still in transport. So when they are completely out, it will be 1,249 people that we've funded out since April 13th, 2014.
And how many other countries have received people? I mean, it's one thing to get somebody out, it's another thing to get them settled safely.
Well, there are 14 different countries that have accepted these refugees. I consider them refugees. And those countries range from several European countries, France and Germany has accepted some, Canada has accepted some, and many of the African countries. And Rwanda has accepted quite a few. It's somewhat embarrassing that the U.S. has not accepted any, and in fact, Gabby is going to be checking a little bit into that, I think, later to see what we might do to urge, through our representatives, possibly to urge them to consider accepting some of these refugees.
So that might be something that if somebody's watching the program and we get to the end and how can people help, that might be something that somebody might say, I'd like to help out in that way by leaning on the U.S. government or members of Congress or whoever
to find out why and help let
Yeah.
people know that this is important.
Yeah. Are there any success stories? I know you are very protective about privacy, but I know there are some success stories where people have self-reported and posted things on the blog on your website. The website being www.friendsugandansafetransport.org. And the blog there has some success stories that people have self-reported.
Right,
Can you
not all of them
summarize?
are published on the blog, but some of them are. We've got, I know, one Ugandan man who went to one of the European countries, wrote to us and let us know that he was working, had a job, and had a new boyfriend, and was just ecstatically happy because he could be out and open about his sexual orientation and not have to live in fear of being killed or attacked. Another one who I'm still very connected with is a lesbian woman who we helped get to another European country. And she's actually still waiting for permanent status. She's waiting for court decisions. She's living, I think, still in a refugee service center of some kind. But she's very happy. She's very active. She has a new girlfriend that she's in love with. And again, she's very open about who she is and says, I couldn't do this at home. I had to live in total fear. And so just those kinds of stories are amazing.
Okay. I want to connect with Alan about the sort of the Quaker context for this kind of thing. This is not the first time Quakers have stuck their necks out. You mentioned the Underground Railroad already, and the Quaker history goes back hundreds of years, where very often you're sticking, and all three of you are active in the local Olympia Friends meeting. You've been active with Olympia Friends meeting, which is the name of the congregation. It's the Religious Society of Friends would be the more formal name, and instead of a church, they call it a meeting. Okay. You've been active with Olympia Friends meeting since the 1970s, and organizes the fundraising for this that all three of you are involved with. Can you tell us something about the centuries of Quaker, what you sometimes refer to as testimony, another technical jargon term of the faith community? Tell us something about the origin and the parameters of this.
Well, we have a number of practices and testimonies. I mean, testimonies and ideas alone won't do you a whole lot of good unless you manifest them as practices. Our guides are called faith and practice. Faith is good, ideas are good, practice is key. One of the Quaker testimonies is integrity. Another is equality. I don't think it takes people in the audience can figure how these things apply. And we, you hear it say, no one is free unless we're all free. That's the integrity of the larger world, the larger community. But also peace. Everyone knows the Quakers are a peace church. Not everyone, but we are. And Quakers have often acted without taking sides. When there's in World War II, Quakers didn't want to fight. In World War I as well. They ran ambulance corps. If people are in need, you can serve. You don't have to line up on one side or the other. You just have to find a way to act. And this is just one in a long chain of discerning what's right and figuring out a way to do something about it.
When we were on the phone to prepare for this interview, you mentioned that in the early 90s, Olympia Friends meeting decided that you would provide the place where people of the same sex could marry. And that was quite unusual.
It was then.
20 years ago plus.
And it wasn't easy for everybody in our group either. It caused some discomfort. We have committees, but we don't have a hierarchy. So everybody gets to share. And we make our decisions based on consensus. So these ideas don't come as the elders have decided we're going to do this. It comes as a community commitment. And just as now, 20 years later, you'll hear stories about people coming around on issues like marriage equality because of people they knew. We share deeply enough with each other about our perspectives, about if we're Christocentric or theists, about our faith. Meeting includes folks who are non-theists as well, and they share about their sense of what is right and what motivates them. And through the process of consensus, not always easy, not always quick, you come to conclusions. Our minute was, and I can't cite...
Minute is a technical term for
a minute is the technical
thing you wrote up.
When you said we decided, when we decided to take action, we minute it. And we do it as the group. The group's authority comes from within and from discernment and from sharing that. With same-sex marriage, as I was saying, like many people now who said I came around because people I knew, we knew each other, and we knew that those were vital, loving, equal relationships. It becomes obvious when you open yourself enough. Some of these things become obvious. The facts are an important part, but we can sense things beyond what we can reason, and some things you can come to quickly. That one wasn't easy, but when we decided to do that, we decided we're not just going to put it in the record, but we're going to look for ways to affirm our support for lesbian, gay, and bisexual, and all others who seek marriage equality. And we married people in our community. We worked for legislation, and we lobbied through our national organizations to make it happen.
When we were preparing for the program and you told me that, I thought it's like one more case where the Friends are out in front, as Friends have been on so many issues, out there taking a stand based on the faith commitment, and then later the other parts of society come around. But so often you're out in front, and it seems to be, to my way of thinking, it indicates a validity of your process, that so often the Quakers land on a place where they need to be, and eventually other folks come around. So it seems to be, you're building a track record. You've built a long track record of centuries of being out ahead, and then later folks come around. I just want to express appreciation for that.
We're careful not to pat ourselves too much on the back and rest on past laurels, though, because as anybody who's watching knows, these things don't stay settled and they don't go away. So you have to keep it current.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Quakers are modest and not self-aggrandizing. So, Gabby, I wonder if you can tell us something about how the Friends meeting took action on this crisis in Uganda in April 2014?
Well, it started a little before that, when a couple of us who I mentioned had connections with people in Uganda who were having people come to them who needed help. We started mentioning informally at the end of the silent part of meeting, we've got friends who are trying to help people get out of Uganda. If anybody has any money they want to give us, we'll send it to them. And so people would hand us cash or write a check, and we would send it to them, and they would use it to help do what they could. And the Peace and Social Justice Committee, which is part of the Friends meeting structure, started talking about that and recognized that we could really do something more formal as a meeting, if the meeting would like to. And we proposed a minute and presented it at Meeting for Business, which is a way that the meeting makes decisions and governs itself as a whole, with everybody who shows up to the meeting for business having a say. And we were actually pretty blown away because the meeting overwhelmingly decided yes. This is right, we should do it now. There were some questions about logistics, about the treasurer and if that treasurer could handle it. And we didn't really have any idea how big it was going to get. So we got into it without recognizing that we were going to be sitting here now saying we've gotten 1,249 people out in not that long a time. But we were hoping to get 15 or 20 people out. And the meeting just said, absolutely, let's do this.
I find this really encouraging because everybody who's a longtime Quaker knows that there are jokes within the faith community about how long it takes to reach decisions because you have to operate by consensus. And for this thing to happen so quickly, again, seems a validation of you're really onto something that needs doing.
Well, it really felt like the right thing to do, I think, for so many people, regardless of what their position was on gays and lesbians or transgender. I think it was a question of just saying, this is about fairness and equity and equality, and this is the just and right thing to do. And so there was very little discussion. It was interesting. And I think the other thing that maybe isn't totally clear is that what a minute is a written statement where there's agreement and it becomes sort of part of the record, if you will.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things you don't have to think real hard to figure out the details in your reasoning, whether it's right or wrong. And we were fortunate enough to have people who had some skills and some connections. And we trust each other because of the committee structure. And people did ask questions like, are you being scammed? And they answered them. They answered them admirably. They did their due diligence enough that any of us who thought, well, there's been good causes before, but they've turned out to have some, the story wasn't as it was presented. But with our friends and their connections and their experience internationally, those questions were resolved rather quickly. And the rest of it was, we were led to it quite clearly.
Yeah, the Quaker concept of being led, tell us what that means, leading or...
Well, I'm sure it means something different for many different people. As I say, some of us would speak in being led by the inner light or by the divine, and others would simply, you can leave it at would be led because you're drawn to something that's so clear. Clarity is another thing. Being clear, as opposed to, that's why you have to live a simple life.
Yeah.
You don't live a simple life, it's hard to be clear because you're frenetic. And with years of practice, friends can get clear pretty quickly, and the obvious is not so hard to find sometimes.
Yeah, I want to dig a little bit deeper into the operations of how this functions. How do the volunteer organizers there protect privacy and safety? We've talked about this some. Is there anything else to add to that about the privacy, the safety?
Kathleen mentioned that they don't necessarily know each other. The two groups that we're working with absolutely don't know. They know there's another conductor working in a different place, but they don't know who it is, and they don't really want to because it protects them all to not have that information. Another thing is we can't make referrals to them. We sometimes hear from people who write to us, fill out the contact form on our website and say, my name is this, I'm in Uganda, I'm gay, I'm scared, please help me get out of the country. And we have to write back and say the conductors, the people who we work with, are found by word of mouth, and we can't refer to them. So we wish you luck, but we can't give you access to their information because it's just not safe for them.
Right.
And we know that there could be people, and probably have been people, who would love to find out who they are and do them harm and stop them from doing this. So that's a really imperative part of the secrecy, and it's part of what caused some media scrutiny of the project early on, when we did hear from some reporters who wanted to do stories and wanted to interview the conductors and wanted to know who they were and how we knew them and some details, and we basically just had to say, sorry, we can't do that.
Yeah. Now, it's one thing to get somebody out of a country, it's another thing to get somebody settled in a safe country. And you mentioned, Kathleen, that there are 14 countries, not the US, but 14 other countries that have settled. And you've got volunteers in your operations who can help people with matters of immigration or whatever it takes to get somebody.
We don't have them.
No,
I guess that,
I don't mean you folks, but
we don't,
other folks.
The connections we have with our conductors have people they work with who take that role in the next country, so that the adjoining countries to Uganda, where they help them do the process of getting ready to move and finding a home and moving to it.
And those are different organizations, just a chain of support among different organizations.
But it's at every step along the way, there's privacy
and we don't know who they are.
And that's safest for everybody if.
We have some information about some of them, but not names. And
And you told me on the phone, Gabby, that if somebody has to be held someplace safely, in a safe house or someplace, that's one thing. But like United Nations refugee camps can be very unsafe.
Yeah, what we have heard and know from other people's experiences is that the United Nations refugee camps, for example, in Kenya, are not safe. They're crowded, there's not enough resources, they're not really safe for anybody, but They are an inbred place where there's a lot of hatred towards LGBTQ people. And so it's not safe for them. And that's basically our one agreement with the conductors we work with, is that when they move somebody out of Uganda, they don't put them in a refugee camp. They have to have other places, and they do, and they've got other places where they can go and other resources for them.
Okay. Kathleen, I want to check with you about something else that you know about, actually that all of you know about, that is one thing for LGBTQ folks in Uganda to be in danger, but also their friends, allies, family members. I think you mentioned this earlier in the interview, and you mentioned this on the phone when we were preparing. Family members, volunteers, everybody's at risk.
Yes, and that's one of the problems, is that especially some of the younger people, they're really disowned from their family, and it's not safe for them to return to the family home. So if they don't want to jeopardize their family, they will stay away, and many times don't have any sources of support or connections, and so it can be very dangerous. It's been reported to us that people have been refused treatment, medical treatment, at clinics, at hospitals, and by individual physicians, that they've been refused treatment because of this, and it's because the health care professionals are fearful. They're fearful they receive threats, and they're fearful for their lives and their safety.
Yeah. So anybody who's an ally is at risk,
That's
or anybody
right.
who's even perceived to be LGBTQ would be,
That's
you know,
right.
if somebody
And I
thinks
think-
you're gay, that's,
I think that's important, which is
Yeah.
that some people are not, but if there's just the strong suspicion
Yeah,
that that's true, you're in danger.
and that makes it all the more important for bold actions like this to lift up the publicity so people know to sort of roll things back. And we have that kind of, we have dangers in this country too, as you know from your own family experience,
Right.
and so many other people know. You told me on the phone that 2 conductors had died. Tell us just briefly how that,
Yeah.
what happened, because it's 2
we've
different
had,
circumstances.
2 of the conductors that we worked with, one of them was assaulted in a gay bashing based on his work with this project, or with getting people out of the country, and he died from his injuries. Another one, Tony, I don't need to protect his first name anymore because he's not with us anymore. Tony was a gay pharmacist who lost his job, and who connected with other people who lost it because he was gay, connected with other people who were doing this work, and had such an amazing passion for helping people that he completely ignored his own needs and his own health, and he got hundreds of people out of Uganda, and finally collapsed. And it turned out he had very active tuberculosis and other diseases and cholera and all kinds of stuff. And he wound up dying because his system was so depleted. But he did this work and sacrificed himself to save other people. He's a true amazing hero that I got to be friends with while he was here, and I'll carry him with me forever. What we're doing is the easy part. We're in the United States, we have privilege, we have access to be able to get the word out about this work, and we decided to use that to support these people who were doing that kind of sacrifice. And all of the conductors are doing that kind of sacrifice. Not all of them are as ill as he was, but they're putting their lives on the line. They're totally sacrificing everything in order. They don't get any money. We've paid some medical bills for them when they've been assaulted or something, but they don't have a salary. They have to work at a job and figure out how to make a living so that they can do this work. And that's...
But this is the way it is on so many important things. You're not going to get a government grant to do this kind of work. It's all volunteer from your heart.
Right. And there are moments when it's imperative to act immediately, and this is one of the things that happens, and that I think there are times that we feel a bit under stress because the money may not be there to get the next 15 people out, and they may be in imminent danger.
Yeah.
So when we get information about that, and there are times when we will essentially make a loan
Yeah.
to the group so that so action
Yeah.
can be taken, and then that's repaid. But there's no payment. It's all volunteers.
Is it?
I think this might be a good time to mention something that's occurred to me. Gabby mentioned that we have the easy part, and we get a lot of benefit. If you have a way that you can do something in a situation like this, let's not forget that's a benefit to you. Most people are drawn, just as this pharmacist was, to justice when they dig in. And to have something you can actually do,
Yeah.
that's good.
Thank you. Yeah. Is there anything else we need to know about current numbers of people currently in need as of December 2015?
Yeah, well, I mentioned conductor number 2, we use numbers for
Yeah.
them, is the one who is in the process of getting the 54 people out. Conductor number 1 has, over the last 2 or 3 months, with our raising funds, been able to move 11 seminarian students who were kicked out of their seminary because they were suspected of being gay. But they have right now got 15 lesbian college students from a Catholic university who were kicked out. And so we need to raise money to help move those people out of the country.
Now, from what you folks told me on the phone in preparation for this, from one location, it's 50?
52.
It's either 52 or 55. It's actually gone down to 52
Oh, okay,
when we move.
$52 a person from one location, and then there's another location that has more complex stops in the
Right.
transportation
And
process.
that's conductor number 1,
and
who
that's
right
100
now has the 15
Yeah,
lesbian women.
And that's about $185 per person
Yep.
to get out. You've raised about 115,000 total?
Since we started formally as an
This is
organization.
amazing.
We're not an organization, as a project
Yeah.
of the meeting.
Yeah, so that's an amazing amount of money, and the need is still out there. So you've done huge amounts of good work, 1,200 people saved, but an ongoing, and one of you told me on the phone, you see this as a project that's going to need to continue for some time.
Right. And all these funds they get filtered through Olympia monthly meeting, through the
Right.
Quaker meeting, but also there are 14 or 15 Quaker meetings throughout the country that have been supporting this. And
Right.
some have also written minutes for their meeting to support this minute.
And you've got support from some Unitarians and other folks.
Yeah, we were actually very surprised. Soon after we started the project and put the website up and announced it, we found out that the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is their national organization, or their national conference, was meeting and decided, because it was put forth to them, to adopt our project and support it and ask all their members to send donations. And that was huge. We don't know how that happened, really. So
Yeah. So you're raising money locally from Quakers, and I'm not a Quaker, I'm not a Unitarian, I'm an other, and I've donated. I wrote a check yesterday. I mailed it today, and so you're looking to a wider source of
yeah,
support.
we've had donations from individuals as far away as Australia and other parts of Africa, where people have heard about the work that we're doing and
Right.
donated money, and
And-
all over the United States.
Yeah.
And when they've heard, they can go, of course, they can go to the website and see for themselves what they need to do, and also how to raise.
Right, there's a
how to send the
PayPal
money.
thing,
Yes.
and my preference is to write a check.
Right.
And I understand you can write a check to Olympia Friends Meeting, and then earmark the lower left corner, Uganda, and that way 100% of the money goes to that work.
Right.
Whereas PayPal takes a little slice out for processing, but the Olympia Friends Meeting does not take any slice of it.
And
all
none of
goes
us,
Every bit,
And you're all
every bit
volunteer.
goes.
yeah, we're all volunteers.
So-
The only thing I think we've spent is
Postage.
a little bit of money on postage and printer stuff.
Yeah, and we'll provide the links for how people can connect at the closing credits.
And the only money that didn't go directly to transport LGBTQ people is the money that we use to help in with the medical situation with
Oh,
the
yeah.
conductor. So that's the only other cost that.
Or occasional food when somebody has had, when the transporters or the conductors have had a group in hiding for 2 months and they have to spend their own money that they
Oh.
hardly have any.
Yeah.
They need help sometimes with food, and sometimes we don't have enough to get somebody out, but we have enough to help them
Yeah.
buy food for the group.
One of the things probably that's helpful in this is that Quakers have such a good long history of respect for the kind of not just advocacy work, but direct service, direct aid work. People watching the program might have heard of the American Friends Service Committee, AFSC, that's been around for so long, does direct service work and also very good advocacy for peace and human rights and all the good stuff. And the Friends Committee on National Legislation, FCNL, that educates the public, that interacts with Congress and moves things on good issues. And statewide, we have the Friends Committee on Washington Public Policy, FICWIP, Friends Committee on Washington Public Policy, that interacts with the legislature to try to get them to do good stuff at the state level here. And like AFSC has done work all around the world, and there's a residual body of goodwill, and Quakers have credibility. So I don't remember who had mentioned on the phone, but you've got, and you mentioned on the program here that you've got contacts in Africa from other work that Quakers are doing, and so you've got that to draw upon.
Yeah, the Quakers went to the Great Lakes region, the region that Uganda's in.
Yeah, that's Great Lakes in Africa, not
Great Lakes
not
in
the ones
Africa.
up by
That's
Michigan.
right. Great Lakes in Africa, Rwanda, Uganda. When genocide erupted as a healing force afterwards, and spreading things like nonviolent communication.
Yeah. When we were talking on the phone about the Quaker approach to this kind of work, you mentioned an acronym SPICE that identifies 5 qualities. You mentioned simplicity, peace, integrity, community, and equality. You mentioned a couple of these. I wonder if you can say something about these.
Well, we use that because it makes it easy to remember. In first day school, which is Sunday school, early Quakers didn't like any reference to other gods or nature worship, so Thor didn't work and the sun didn't work. So we called it first day school. We still do. Although I think friends are much more open-minded about objects of our attention. It's something that helps a young person and an older person like me keep them straight. But when I was asked to present on this, when I did some adult education in Monteverde, Costa Rica, I gained a particular appreciation for the fact that integrity is in the middle. Because your personal integrity is very important. You have to develop it. You have to develop a state of being that allows you to go out in this broken world and do stuff. And integrity is where we historically, Quakers would speak about seeing that of God in all people. And your integrity is part of the fact that you have to own up to, you have a part of this divine world to do, to be, and it's in the middle. All those other things flow from it. If you're going to respect that about somebody else, you're not going to be violent. You're going to be peaceful. You're going to assume equality because they too have that part of the divine in them, or that part of goodness. Simplicity, as I said before, so you can keep your life and your state of being uncluttered enough to have the resolve to do stuff. Community, because if you do it alone, you won't. You'll go crazy. You have to keep your friends and help them.
Yeah.
But SPICE is essentially an
But
acronym.
SPICE is just a way
It's
to
an
help
acronym
it.
for
Yeah.
the testimonies.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And so, and the testimonies are as close as Quakers come to creeds.
Creeds. We
We
don't
don't have
tell you what
creeds.
to think, but we do tell you what we value.
We don't have creeds and
Principles.
doctrines, but we
Right.
do have
Yeah.
we do
Right.
have testimonies.
If somebody watching the program is intrigued and wants to find more, they could visit friendsugandansafetransport.org, and you've got a little section on the website about frequently asked questions, FAQs.
Right.
That's helpful. That's informative.
And that came out of dealing with the frequently asked questions.
Just like the name
We still
implies.
tweak those from time
Yeah,
to time
yeah.
as we see that there's something that needs to be put out there so that people don't have to necessarily ask us.
Right.
And some of that goes back to the process we talked about, where
Right.
we were threshing in our own community.
Yeah, yeah.
And we still are.
And we still
Yeah,
are.
yeah. And then you've got the blog, and then you told me that people can subscribe to the blog?
Yeah, there's a place where you can put your email address in and subscribe to the blog. And we don't send stuff out that often, but that's really the fresh part of our website. The other pages are more static information that may change. Like I said, the FAQs we tweak from time to time. But the blog is where we do things like put out appeals when we have a situation like the 54, or share stories of success and share stories. Like there's an amazing story that the transporter that works with one of our conductors wrote about how he came to recognize his own homophobia and transcend it because he met a gay man who was involved in this work, who opened his eyes and his heart. And he's now, as a transporter, he's a businessman. He has to pay his drivers and keep his equipment up. But he is now transporting people and putting his own life at risk as a straight ally. You can read his transformation on the blog, and that's really an exciting piece that we get to share.
Right.
That kind
And then you have a Facebook page, and we'll have that in the closing credits as
Right.
well, so people can do that. And you have a Twitter account as well?
We do. We don't use it much, except I'm not a big Twitter person, but when we post something to the blog, it automatically goes out on Twitter and Facebook.
Okay. And then the phone that you use is 360-888-5291, and I know that phone number works because I've called it just lately to find out. And
that's my personal cell phone
you're very
number.
responsive to the phone.
I try.
And very informative and helpful and supportive, so that works. Let's see, this is part of Olympia Friends meeting, the local Quaker congregation, which is 501c3, so it's tax deductible for those that want to do that. I'm glad that you don't take anything out for processing.
Right.
So 100% of the donations go to good work, and checks payable to Olympia Friends Meeting, mail it to 3201 Boston Harbor Road Northeast, Olympia, 98506-2800, and then earmarked lower left corner, Uganda, and that's all you need. And the PayPal we mentioned as well. You
Right,
can
which
get
is
that
linked
through
from
the-
our website.
From the website, yeah. How could viewers help? We have just a couple minutes left. I want to make sure that people know that there are some ways to help. Can we be kind of brief in listing some ways to help, and then we'll move on to closing?
Well, real quick, I'm thinking the blog also occasionally announces events where you can get together with people for fundraising. That's fun.
So
People like
fundraising
fun
events.
parts.
We do
Fun
fundraising.
Yeah.
fundraising.
We don't do enough of them. We need
Don't
to
do
do
enough of
more.
them, but
We need
well,
help
blog
organizing
So
them.
that would be something that somebody could do.
done.
Somebody who's good at organizing events can say, "Oh, I'll work with you folks and come up with
We would love that.
a fundraising gig of some kind."
And we have done that. We've done, for example, auctions, and I'm hoping to do another one
Yeah.
in the
And we had a Halloween
relatively near
party.
Yeah.
future.
Okay.
Yes.
Other ways, people just to help spread the word, provide links from their organization's websites, their religious faith congregation website, or whatever.
We have a flyer, full 8.5 by 11, and a 4 on a page that are in PDF format that people can download and post in different places and share with their friends or with their faith communities or organizations
Okay.
to help us get the word out.
So that would be something, and then people could use your phone number, and presumably there's a way through the website to email you folks
Yes.
and say, I'm interested in helping, what about this, what about that, how can I help, whatever. So
We would love that.
I
We want
think
to do that.
one of the more important things they can do too is to go to the website and to review those. It's very worth reading those individual accounts of the people who have,
Yeah.
have gotten out. I think there's approximately 20 or so, or maybe a bit more available for people to read.
Yeah, I read a few. It's
They're very
like, it's real
persuasive.
people. It's real people, and that's, it comes down to real people.
And we're real people. It shouldn't go without
Yeah,
mentioning that
that's right.
people are welcome at the Friends meeting where they'll certainly hear about
Yeah.
this and other things.
Yeah.
It's not just for members only. And,
Yeah, you folks are very welcoming to non-members, and there's a whole gradation of being an attender, even if you
involvement.
don't join.
Yes, of course. And we
that's-
will
that's
not
fine.
come after you. We don't proselytize.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
welcome to come and be
Right.
as who you are, as
Yeah.
you are.
Great. I want to thank Kathleen O'Shaughnessy and Alan Mountjoy Venning and Gabby Clayton. I want to thank the folks who've been watching the program as well. People of goodwill who pay attention to the world around us can easily feel overwhelmed by the problems, and the problems, especially elsewhere in the world, can seem too big and too remote. And so we end up feeling powerless sometimes. But fortunately, other people in other countries and people in our local communities have figured out ways to address these big international problems with bold, nonviolent action. And a great example is what our friends here are doing. The Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund, based in Olympia, Washington, USA, is one example because it mobilizes local people to help courageous people elsewhere who are risking their own lives to help people find safety and to resettle where they can be safe. Courageous people in Uganda and allies in other countries are resettling folks. Generous people in the United States are collaborating in this great humanitarian venture that really does affirm human dignity and save lives. And it's really a matter of life and death. I support it. I think it's great. I encourage people to visit the website, www.friendsugandansafetransport.org, see the information there, connect up, donate if you feel moved. The world needs more projects like this where people can courageously and nonviolently stick their necks out to help other people. And it really feels good to help with that kind of work. You can get information about a wide variety of issues related to peace, social justice, and nonviolence by contacting the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation, and we have credits at the end that'll help you do that. We're all one human family. We all share one planet. We can make the world a better place, but we all have to work at it. And the work that you can offer is just what the world needs. Thanks.
Thank you.